So hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Still Building San Antonio. Today we are talking to Franklin Morris. He is the founder of KeepTabz, and I'm really excited to hear what he has to say today. So Franklin, why don't you give us your first quick 30-second rundown of what KeepTabz is so that the audience knows, and then we'll kick it off with some questions.
Sure, yeah. KeepTabz is a competitive intelligence product. I created it so that companies can keep tabs on everything their competitors are up to in a single app. That's news, reviews, social content, pricing changes, messaging changes, all the things you'd care about, just so you can be aware of what's happening across your industry, decide whether to take action on that or not. And so, yeah, it helps companies never be blindsided again by competitors.
Yeah, I think that that's something that we see a lot of in this world with the startups. They always have to be aware of who else is raising money, what customers they're getting, if they're hiring, all sorts of different things. And so that's kind of what you're saying when you're saying competitive analysis, being aware of all those different things about competitors, right?
Yeah, and it goes, I think, both for smaller startups and for bigger companies too. We have some companies that are much larger that are watching very small startups that have raised from top tier VCs that are increasing and growing at like 5x the rate that they are. And so, but especially important for founders, I think.
That makes sense. Okay. Well, before we jump too far into where you're at with KeepTabz today, let's rewind the clock a little bit. And I know that, you and I have had some conversations in the past. One of the things that I found really interesting is you're a part of a band. So tell me a little bit about what does playing music in a band do that building a startup or the work that you do kind of 9 to 5, what does it feel that does?
Yeah. It's super weird. When I send a really great sales email, nobody cheers for me. When I do a great pitch deck, people don't jump up and down screaming about how awesome I am. So I think there's maybe some of that. It's kind of like being a founder it can sometimes feel pretty thankless, right? Yeah. It's like 98% rejection.
Yeah.
And it's like if you're going into that for affirmation externally, you're probably gonna have a pretty bad time.
Yeah.
But I think that doing music for me now at this point, we were very active when I was younger, and then now we're all mid-40s dads and stuff, but still playing clubs and everything. It's a creative outlet, but it is also just me with my best friends doing things in rooms full of, shouting people who are having a good time. It's kind of just a big fun party atmosphere now.
That's cool.
And I don't get that a lot from sitting in front of my computer firing off emails.
Yeah, I get that. And I bet it's something that just, mixes up with some spontaneity in the middle there, but also something very familiar, being with your friends and doing something that you're familiar with.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And I remember when you first told me, I pulled up your music, which anybody who's looking out, it's the Murdochs on Spotify. And, listen to some of the music. It's great. So yeah, I just thought that we would definitely have to talk about that if we were going to be chatting. So
and there's similarities too, interestingly, between the two. Like the fact that you are bringing something into the world that doesn't already exist, working with a group of people to kind of do that. There are interesting parallels as well, but more differences probably than parallels.
That's actually a good point that I hadn't really thought about is that kind of creation piece, specifically with partners. So I do see that. I guess taking that too, obviously joining a band, quite a while ago and sticking with it. What led you to, your experiences of work day to day that led you to building KeepTabz in the first place? So give us a little bit of background about what your experiences are that led to this.
Yeah. So if you're a musician doing it professionally, 90% of your time is probably spent marketing yourself to people. And 10% you actually write stuff. Yeah. And so I spent a lot of time on MySpace. That tells you how old I am, right? Doing just kind of marketing and outreach and building, partnerships with other bands and venues and labels and stuff like that. And so it actually was not that crazy of a transition, I think, to go into doing that same kind of activity for larger companies.
Yeah.
I went to school for creative writing, and I think at the time I figured I was going to be a novelist or the editor of Rolling Stone, and they weren't hiring for either one of those roles when I graduated. So I went to work for the video game company EA and then Dell after that. And Dell was really where I got started.
Okay.
Doing marketing for the much bigger companies, focusing on the creative side of marketing. and worked my way up to managing teams, eventually became creative director at an agency. And then I made kind of a pivot in my career where I moved to San Francisco, started working for a small Series B startup that then turned into a much bigger startup. We were much more focused on growth and doing marketing that really had like an impact that you could feel in quarter. And I just kind of fell in love with startup world, I think. I've been at smaller startups like Series A, Series B, VC-funded startups ever since then. Most recently at Alloy AI as their VP of marketing for 4 years, the last 4 years. And just got the itch to kind of do something on my own. I felt a problem in the market that I wanted there to be a solution to solve, and I couldn't find a solution for it. So I think I had maybe a sense of like a self-delusion and thought, oh, this will be easy to build. I'll just do this.
Yeah. And so I guess hearing that kind of journey and then identifying the competitive analysis, what size, I guess, of your capacity was spent day to day in that world when you were a part of these startups that were growing? Was there quite a bit of your time and your team's time spent understanding what your competitors were doing in general?
To be honest, I think the biggest problem is that we didn't have the time to do it, right? We spent a lot of time being reactive to what was happening in the market in a lot of cases. At the bigger companies I worked at, when I was at Rackspace and Dell and stuff like that, we had teams of people or individual people whose job it was to do all the things our product does and like synthesize that and send emails out to the company informing them of what's happening in the market.
Gotcha.
We didn't have that at the smaller companies. So we would oftentimes find out about a competitor move or a huge raise or a product launch like weeks after it happened. Or worst case scenario, we would hear about it in an active deal from a prospect. They'd say like, oh, well, this company has this, or their pricing is now lower than yours or something like that. And we'd be a bit blindsided by that and kind of on the back foot. And so it felt like we were always kind of reacting. Like we just, nobody has time to go through and check every competitor's website and every competitor's social feed every day to go through all the different reviews and understand like what it is people like and hate about them, and so I think that was kind of the biggest problem.
That makes so much sense too, because as I think through companies that are working on something that they feel is pretty big, they're really quiet about it until they know that they have a set strategy and market to really go after. And so as I think through that and putting myself in the shoes of one of those companies' competitors, they are going to be caught blindsided by it because they don't have that inside knowledge. And so as we then transition to the thought of like what KeepTabz has, is there anything that jumps out to you while thinking through what a startup in stealth mode is doing that may trigger something on a KeepTabz watch list by chance?
Yeah, totally. This is actually really interesting. So there are ways to read those market signals. There are, to get super tactical, there's very small changes that can often take place that signal big things. If a company changes their terms of service, which everybody has that on their website, this is like a 50-page long document that everybody just accepts and nobody actually reads. But we scan the terms of service daily for very small changes. Oftentimes, the lawyers will insert something in there to kind of like indicate coverage. It might be something very small, like now they're moving into a new region, and you'll see that kind of appear in the terms of service.
Gotcha, yeah.
It may be like a kind of covert pricing change. They may introduce something about, hey, now we're training AI models on your data or something like that. And so you're never going to catch that if you're a human, but our product does catch that, and we'll be able to tell you like it could indicate this strategic shift. That would be thing number one. Another thing is that if you just look holistically at like everything a company is doing at their recent product roadmap, their recent partnerships. We just did a thing for a customer where we kind of fed all of the recent 6 months of activity on social posts from the CEO, their own kind of roadmap and announcements and partnerships into AI, and we've trained it to be able to kind of predict and to take a pretty decent stab at like what might this company be building to.
Yeah, like what trajectory are they on? Yeah.
And so it was very clear from that this is a company that is like, they own the mid-market today, but they're building toward enterprise. Like they're moving into your lane now, basically. And so this is like a competitive threat.
That makes so much sense. Okay, I appreciate that kind of walkthrough. As we think, and I kind of think of things very linearly. As we think through that, and we approach the idea to go all in on KeepTabz, walk me through you're at your previous company.
Yeah.
You've been there for a handful of years. You identified the problem, and now you're looking to build the solution. What were your first couple steps to build that solution?
Yeah. Well, I originally tried to vibe code something
Did
on
you?
my own. Yeah. So I got like Lovable and tried to actually, I bet I can just create this product on my own. And it was not possible to do that.
Really?
I think the technology's gotten very quickly a lot better. But one of the challenges we have is that, you're tracking a ton of different data sources. You have to kind of structure those things in the correct way. And just building scrapers and integrating with third-party APIs from like dozens of different data sources is like not something at that point that the AI products were great at doing.
Yeah.
Don't even think it's like fantastic at doing that today, but it's getting very quickly better. And so started off just trying to vibe code it, and I do think I would totally recommend anybody building software starts at that point.
Gotcha. And you have no history in coding yourself, right?
None.
Okay.
Yeah, and so start off trying to do that, which kind of got me to this prototype, that I was able to sort of share around with different friends, with different people, and be like, hey, is this something cool? Is this something people would actually want? I think the right place to start when you're doing that. Let me back up. I'll start with the wrong place to start, which is where I didn't start, thankfully. But it's something I've been mentoring here at Geekdom a really long time, and where I see companies create kind of like a fatal error, I think, at the starting line, is that they kind of start with a solution that they're enamored with, and then sort of try to reverse engineer a problem from that.
Gotcha.
And
we do see that, specifically with the technical founders.
Yeah.
They're just so amazed by what they can build, but they don't really think about what is it solving for whom.
Yeah, and how are those people trying to solve that problem today? Like that gets you to the competitor question, right? And so what I did was started off with, I've been doing marketing for a long time. I had a ton of conversations with people in the industry. Probably talked to 30 different CMOs and VPs of sales at companies to understand how they were solving this problem today, if they even thought it was a real problem worth paying to solve.
Yeah.
And those people who I was talking to, maybe I should consider building this. Like it informed for me like the type of products and features that they would want early on, how much they would be willing to pay for a product like this. And that group of people became eventually our first beta customers, some of our first investors, just because they understood that it was a painful, expensive problem for their company, and they wanted to be a part of helping solve it.
That's cool. And I think that those are ways that we always try to coach, and specifically you as a mentor here at Geekdom, our mentors try to coach the founders, is to realize that you really need to talk to the audience that's going to be buying this product to understand what their problems are and asking the right questions. I know one of the tools we use very often here is called the mom test, and depending on how you ask a question can really dictate what that answer tells you.
Yeah.
And you have to ask the right questions to really get to an understanding that, hey, this is a problem that people are willing to spend money on. And even just through your example that you gave earlier of, when you were at Dell or Rackspace, they had teams whose jobs it was to keep an eye on this. And so as you start to just put a picture around that, you're adding up really quickly. Even if those are, relatively middle of the road paying jobs, you're starting to get up to a couple $100,000 of a team size here. That's an opportunity for you to redirect that cost towards a tool like what you're building.
Yep, 100%.
I think that's great.
And understanding how competitors or how potential customers are solving it today gives you a bit of another angle, because there's like multiple types of competitors, right? There's the direct competitor who's doing exactly what you do. But if you talk to customers, you'll oftentimes find out that they're not using some direct competitive product today. They may be using these sort of adjacent products that do like 10% of what your product does, that you need to be aware of. And perhaps another value proposition could be like, well, you can replace these 5 adjacent things with my one thing. And it's also good to be aware as you're building something that, like, if there are a lot of adjacent products that are already established in the market, like, what would it take for them to just build what I'm building?
Yeah, to just kind of like move slightly this angle.
Yeah, and if they do that, like, how do I respond? These are kind of like really important questions founders need to ask themselves.
Quick just question on that. As you put yourself in the shoes of either somebody using KeepTabz or somebody just really trying to keep tabs of competitors today, how do you help them identify when those possibilities are happening, and where does the scope in your eyes end when you're looking like, okay, let's say I have time or capacity to monitor maybe 5 competitors, is it good to make up majoritively direct competitors, or is it spending more time on the potential up and comers, like you'd mentioned, startups, that are building and scaling, or the ones that could kind of like move into your lane?
Yeah. What I advise companies is that there's a set of direct competitors that you want to be watching on a daily basis. These are the people who you're either building kind of a product is competitive with, or the types of people, if you're a more established company, that you see in deals frequently.
Yeah.
Like, you really want to be aware of everything they're doing. You don't have to react to all of it, but just being aware is like, much better step than being caught off guard, like I already mentioned. Then there's this other set of competitors that are like the adjacent competitors. And I think that you still need to watch them, probably much less frequently. So this is a thing we're building into the product now, where you can actually have a set of adjacent competitors, and maybe you're only tracking what they do once every few weeks.
So the frequency of it, is a little bit less. Gotcha.
Yeah, and you don't have to go quite as deep on them. You just want to be made aware, maybe like once a month, like, hey, are they doing anything cool? Are they moving in a new direction? Did they just release a press release that might indicate that they're kind of like creeping into my space a little bit more? Or are they doing something cool I should consider also building into my product?
Yeah.
Because they see something lucrative in the market that I haven't seen yet. It's kind of a lot of things like that. So I think that mapping those things out is like a good first step. And oftentimes this is, I'll use a non-software example for this. So, you're not competing with who you think you're competing with. Oftentimes you may have a set of products that you think have very similar features, but it so much comes back to talking to customers to determine their actual usage and how they do things.
Yeah.
There's an excellent writer and thinker named Bob Moesta, who, this is his kind of idea, not mine, but he's talked about how Milky Way does not compete with Snickers. You would think that they do, because they're both similarly shaped things with largely the same ingredients in the candy aisle.
Yeah.
But Milky Way is like a decadent, thing. It melts in your mouth. It's very dessert-like. People have that when they want to treat themselves. That competes more with a piece of cake or a glass of wine or a scoop of ice cream, whereas Snickers is hearty and crunchy, and it's something that you grab on the go when you're not gonna be able to have a meal. If you actually talk to customers, that competes more with like power bars and meal replacements and stuff, right?
And you can even see that in their ads. Snickers talks about, getting hangry or whatever, and then filling it with a Snickers bar. You're right.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's because like Bob Moesta is one of these people who's very well established in the industry. I'm sure that's like an idea that they probably got from him, because he's done a lot of this types of research and is a big proponent of actually really talking to customers extensively. I think it's incredibly important to do that, because even in my space, like where I am today, not my space though, but like where I am today, I find in conversations with people, with our potential customers, that our biggest competitor is just maybe doing nothing, or copying and pasting whatever competitors are doing into a Google Doc or Slack or something like that. It is that's the sort of status quo that we're competing against largely. Like, we need to move people from that to us, rather than a competitive product that we need to like get them to rip and replace.
Yeah, because I'm kind of thinking about it with a lot of the startups that we see. They put blinders on and they just go as fast as they possibly can without concern or care for who is potentially aiming for the same target that they are, or to your point with the adjacent ones who may be entering into their lane in the not too distant future. That's typically something that we see them, running towards. But I think the ability for them to do it without too much investment is really something that they'll love. And I guess using that as an example, I know one of the things that I've seen once you've kind of started building KeepTabz is the number of startups that have gone through our programs or that are active within our community that are talking to you about this, or that have helped you through the beta. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so that was the Geekdom community here. This is such an interesting dynamic, because a lot of these people, some of them are, some of them weren't, but a lot of them were people that I kind of coached and mentored through the programming here at Geekdom. And then when I decided it was time to start a company, I was like very kind of T-shaped in my expertise, right? I'm like very deep on marketing, but that's not everything, right? And so, I went to a lot of those people and, asked them for help just with what it took to establish a business and develop a product and things like that. As I talked more about the product, more and more people became kind of interested in it. Even people who at first were like, this is kind of stupid, were like, oh yeah, this is cool. Like I actually see how this works. And once I had an actual prototype and started showing people, there was more and more interest. A lot of the companies coming out of here now, just I'll name a couple: GiveKit, OpenLane. They are, and Mintlock is another one that's using our product here. They are in like highly competitive industries, and they understand how important it is to watch everything that's happening, right?
Yeah.
Zach from GiveKit, he discovered the day he logged into the product, as he was considering, launching a free tier, that a competitor had actually launched something similar and killed it, right? And so that's something that's good to know. Like, oh, that's
why did they kill it?
Yeah, why did they kill it? Like he wouldn't have even had any idea about that if he hadn't seen it in KeepTabz. And so, I think the people here at Geekdom that are building, like those early stage founders, they have a huge need to really understand everything happening in their market. They can't coast at all. And so, there's definitely a need. And I think I've intentionally priced this product at a price point where you don't need to be a huge enterprise in order to have access to this kind of intelligence. You used to need, most similarly competitive products, I think, that are well established in the market today are like $40,000, $60,000. And I wanted a product where people could swipe a credit card, buy, get value the same day. And so that's what we've built.
That makes sense. And I also, I want to touch on the piece that you had led to, or that you talked about earlier, which was this mentor piece, and how that helped you identify not only the potential problem or validate it, but also identify who you could lean on when you're building. Talk about why mentorship, why this community, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm. I feel like building a business, I didn't even appreciate this when I went in. I think it requires a certain amount of self-delusion to probably think that you could just go in and be CEO naivety of a business. But it is so multivariate. Like there's just so many things that it's impossible to be good at all of them. And you'll have different people who have expertise in different areas. And even if their companies are maybe at the same stage yours are, they just bring a very different set of experience and different set of perspective to what you're doing. And so, I mentioned GiveKit again. Zach is one I've leaned on a lot for product help, right? Brian Sierkowski, who's building here, he's also been really helpful with the product side and on even the go-to-market and sales side, right?
Yeah.
A lot of what I've been doing early days is kind of mimicking what he's doing with ChangeBot. And so, I think that there's the mentorship piece has been incredibly important. And even in mentoring other founders, you kind of begin to see the things that they're missing, and it kind of helps you examine your own product from that lens as well. So just the mentoring is helpful.
I mean, not to bring this too close to home, but I've noticed that even with my own kids, when I'm teaching them something, I'll see something, but also I've started to get my eldest to teach my youngest, and you'll see her start to learn something that was not as set in stone for her, and then it'll be okay, and she learns from it. So no, I love that, and honestly, that's one of the best qualities of this community, is this kind of giving first, be helpful type mantra that we see with everybody. And speaking of which, you mentioned Kelsey and OpenLane. I had the opportunity of seeing her pitch over the weekend, at this program that we were holding. And it was great just to watch how knowledgeable she was, specifically about her competitors, where she was coming in at, and why she had a a unique value proposition that nobody else was offering, and who her target audience was. She is really well equipped, and I've seen you guys collaborate, so that's awesome to see.
Yeah, they're one of the power users in the product, and she talked about how she kind of wished she'd had it more during the fundraising period, because there was a similar type of companies that have done big raises and stuff at that point. But she's definitely using it actively today to keep tabs on her industry. And she's one who's in an industry with a lot of competitors, but also a huge potential, right? And so, super critical.
Yeah, because I think about where she's really niched the market. She's got big competitors like Vanta, who really have a lock on the market, and she has this ability to come in at a lower price point, a little bit more flexibility, working with the same kind of audience. It sounds like you're working with these kind of up and coming startups. So I think it's really great. Enough about Kelsey. She's wonderful. But let's talk more about you. So you and I have had the opportunity to chat actually, you pitched for our community fund last year, and we ended up investing in you. Yeah. I know the judges that were in the room with us spoke very highly of what you saw in the market. And one of the things that I remember that they mentioned that both Brian Sierkowski and I walked away from that meeting understanding was you were at a point where the questions that needed to be asked were kind of a different level. And as I think through that, I think that really comes from what we call founder market fit. And I really want to drill down just one more time on this idea of the amount of time that you spent helping startups scale from, let's say, 5 million ARR to 25 million ARR, or 25 million ARR to 100 million ARR, that you really learned what the importance of keeping tabs on the competitors were. So I guess as I think through those stages, those experiences with those other startups, if you had to pull out like one thing, not only that you use in building KeepTabz, but that you would offer to other startup founders that are building, what would you say at that stage, something that would be the most valuable for a founder to know?
Specifically, do you mean like related to competitors stuff, related to building generally?
I'm open to either or. From my perspective, I think that we see a lot of founders here who kind of get stuck at that early stage. And I think one of the best things for them to learn is to see somebody at a level that they have yet to meet, to see like that's how we need to operate. I think your experience specifically with these kind of Series A, Series B funded startups brings with it a level of like, hey, I've seen in those rooms. And one of the things that I've noticed in each one of them as a pattern, this is what I noticed, and I'm bringing to my own building, but I'm also able to offer that to Zach or Kelsey or whatever, if there's anything, and if there's not, no big deal. Okay.
I tend to think, especially today, it's easier than ever to build and launch a product.
Yeah.
The building of the thing is not the hard part. The hard part, and this is hard whether it gets easier the bigger you get, but it's hard early. It's very hard early, and it's hard when you're small but successful. And that is actually selling the thing.
Gotcha.
Like going to market, having the awareness of your product, building that, like building a reputation and a brand that's well known, and actually selling products is extraordinarily difficult. And it's one of the things that almost every founder underestimates how much of a challenge it's going to be. Like there's this, if you build it, they will come mentality.
Yeah.
Even I kind of had that, despite the fact that it's amazing.
You've
like
experienced
you
it,
start forgetting everything that you've been telling other people the entire time as soon as you begin building something yourself. I think that the challenge that a lot of founders need to keep in mind is, how am I actually going to sell this? Like, what channels am I going to use to sell it? Who am I going to partner with to sell it? And will I be able to sell it at a price that will pay for customer acquisition? That's because customer acquisition is not cheap.
Yeah.
And that's something that, like especially the early stage companies that are like where we are, the purpose now is we need to find product market fit before we go bankrupt, right?
Yeah.
And that is the sort of like early stage of where you have to figure out how to actually sell the thing you've built. And that, I think, I've learned is the absolute hardest part of building a business.
One thing that resonates with me in the role that I sit in is I had a CEO coach, for lack of a better term, talk to me very early on in my role and let me know that my title was not really CEO, but it was CRO. And he had meant that in Chief Repeating Officer. And I think as I think through the point that you're making here, somewhat adjacent to that is this idea that like you're never not selling. You are always repeating yourself about what it is that your product does, why it's something that this person sitting in front of you needs to have in their lives. And then, like why it is growing or going to be something spectacular. I see that in what you're saying as you really need to be consistently beating that drum.
Yeah, and that's why you see good CEOs when they get asked questions about what they do and why people should buy it, they pretty much use the same words all the time. It's like a mantra,
a script,
and they've like learned what that is and like how people react to it and that it works, and they're always perfecting it and tweaking it, but you'll notice that they use this exact same kind of script when they talk about that kind of stuff. Because it's about the sort of repetition That's how you build brand and awareness in an industry with a lot of noise.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that insight. As I think through recent decisions that you've made, one of the big ones, and one of the things that we try to celebrate here in a not awkward way, is quitting your job and going all the way in. And I know that that was a decision that you recently came on. Walk us through the delicateness of making that decision, working for a company, having a steady paycheck, and then saying, hey, it's time, and I'm jumping all in on this.
It's a really hard decision. And I tend to think there were multiple factors I was looking at, because it was not only like, do I leave this company? It was also like, I had always kind of envisioned like, oh, it would be nice to be far along and have that money. I have a small child. Those things aren't cheap.
Yeah.
And so, like there was a lot of considerations that I had maybe wouldn't have had if I was like 23 or something and doing this. I think like the other consideration too is like, oh, do I go find a different job? Do I do part-time kind of work? There's a lot of different ways you can kind of do this because you have to make a living, right? And fortunately, I was in a situation where we were able to raise enough money pretty quickly in a short period where I was able to know like we have this much runway, but also now we have targets we have to hit to make sure that that's going to be a sustainable business. Like I know what it's going to take to get to that point.
Yeah.
Where my co-founder and I can live and we can continue to build. I think it's ultimately always a risk. And Jeff Bezos has a kind of framework that I remember I read about him running through when he was starting Amazon, because he had a very good job on Wall Street at that point, I think, a finance guy.
Yeah.
And he made the decision to quit that to start an internet bookstore, which everybody thought was stupid at the time.
Yeah.
And he has this like regret minimization framework where he talked about how like 10 years from now, am I going to regret that I did this and it failed? Or am I going to regret that I never tried to do this? And so I tried really hard to think about that and kind of understood that like, well, it's the right time for me to take a run at this. And if it fails, then I will go back to doing what I've done and like doing. But there aren't always opportunities like this out there. Yeah. And it felt kind of like the right time. So yeah, ultimately it kind of is a combination of faith, I guess, in your own abilities and ideas. And then, if you can make it work, like it's worth doing, because it's extremely hard to build it. And I realize I would not have been able to do this part-time. Like there's a lot of people who can build things as a side hustle. And I think there's a lot to be said about, getting your feet wet and doing something as a side hustle. But I think that to build the type of company I want, like I would have at least needed a lot of concentrated effort and time put into it.
Yeah.
And that's the other challenge when you're just starting a company, is there's nobody else to do stuff for me. I don't have a team of people I can delegate anything to.
That, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, if I don't do it, it doesn't get done.
Yeah.
And I needed to be able to kind of have the clarity in my calendar to be able to do something like that.
That's great. And thank you for sharing that. One of the things you mentioned along that explanation was a co-founder. And I know when you and I first started talking about KeepTabz, that was something that, I don't think you had unlocked just yet. But along the journey, you found a co-founder. Could you tell us a little bit about how you knew it was the right person, right time, and walk us through what they bring to the table?
Yeah. So I'm non-technical as a founder. I've spent my career in technology, but I don't write the code necessarily. Yep. And early on, it became clear that this needed to be a real product that could scale, not just kind of like a vibe code thing that might break. And so one of the challenges was kind of figuring out somebody who could build that I could like trust, that could translate my non-technical direction or my business direction into a technical output. And I met Vitaly online through a company called Lemon.io, which has very high-end kind of tech talent. We started working together, and it was like love at first slack. And I think we clicked really well. He was somebody I trusted. He saw the vision of what we were doing. And then at a certain point, I realized like I'm just raising money to put it into this guy's bank account. So he really likes the product. He likes working with me. I like working with him. Let's like see if we can make an arrangement here so that we can kind of work and build this thing together. And that means taking on more risk,
Yeah, you want to have that person that is in the trench with you, and you can look to, and even if not physically, but you can look to them and be like, I know that you're here. I know that you understand what we're building and where we're going.
Yeah, 100%.
One of the things you mentioned also was raising capital, which we know whenever we talk to, and I'm sure you've heard this in your mentorship as well, is one of the hardest things for the founders to find. Did you find it hard? Or was it more easy? And how'd you navigate it?
No, it's extremely hard, extremely time consuming. And I'm kind of glad I always started off with the intention of not even trying to raise a huge round of capital or anything like that. I've heard stories about founders talking to 100 different VCs, and
before they get a single yes.
Yeah, it all is extraordinarily time consuming.
Yep.
I kind of always started off with the mindset of like, I know how much I need to raise in order to like give me the runway to try and get this thing to sustainability. And I wanted to raise that and nothing more at this point.
If you don't mind, what was that number? Like timeline, runway wise, what was that number in your mind?
Yeah, it was 250.
Okay.
And so we've raised 255,
Gotcha.
Basically. And
that bought you how many months of runway?
I would say, depending on like go-to-market spend and how that scales, that's about 12 months for us.
So a year of committed sales building and getting, gotcha, okay.
That's right. And so, the process, and I spoke with a number of VCs. Most of that was through the connections here at Geekdom that I had. But ultimately the most money we raised came from angel investors.
Okay.
And that was not something where early on I went even seeking out that kind of investment. I think I was fortunate that I've been working in the industry a long time. I've talked to a lot of people who are having these problems. And when I would approach people in those positions and talk to them, they multiple times volunteered to invest. They'd be like, yeah, I want to be a customer, but also like, are you taking investment? And so kind of was able to accrue that amount just from going back to my past network, people who had worked with me, former bosses, things like that, who were just big believers in me and kind of understood, I think, the founder market fit part you were talking about and understood the problem. And so we're willing to put in on that. And it's super helpful.
I think that's such a strong validation to who you are that is happening. And I want to take a quick moment to celebrate that with you, because for me, you hear consistently from investors, they're not investing in the idea because ideas are a dime a dozen. It's really who sitting in front of them, who's pitching this idea, whether or not they believe that this person can bring it to reality. And so taking a quick pause there, and you going back to people that you've worked with in the past to be angel investors in this new idea in you, I think is really great and well deserved in your part. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.